today, right here, right now. This is the moment that you will finally say,
I'm growing my accounting practice. And you're going to discover exactly how right here, right now on the Grow My Accounting Practice podcast.
episode 124.
Yeah, this is a big one, man.
Yeah, pumped for today.
And last week we had a best of. We got a lot of great feedback about that.
And welcome, everyone. I'm Ron Saharian, co-founder of Profit First Professionals.
And I'm Mike Michalowicz, the author of Profit First. Hopefully you have a copy of that in your hands. If you don't, pick it up. It's at your favorite bookstore. It's at Amazon. It's everywhere. And a brand new book's coming out called Clockwork about organizational efficiency. I hope you pick that up too. And my friends, this show, what you're listening to, it's called GMAP, Grow My Accounting Practice. This is a show where we teach you every element to grow your accounting or bookkeeping practice, to drive you forward, to achieve that size you've envisioned, to have that impact you've always wanted. We teach you it all here. And how do we do it? Well, first we have an amazing guest come on, Ed Kless. Bring it. And we also bring the insider access tips, so you can see what we've got going on here.
Yeah, good insider look today.
Yeah, oh good, I can't wait. And we have a GMAP Now task. The one task that if you do it, you'll grow your practice. Literally, we're 124 into this. Well, last week was a repeat because it was our best of. So if you didn't do that the first time, which I have a bad feeling you might have not, you better have done it the second time.
It'd be $1 million firm by now.
Oh,
at least.
Millions more. You could have quadrupled your size if you do these tasks. And we take them very seriously, by the way.
We do them here.
We do them here. We do them here.
And, of course, you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, Google Play, and, of course, growmyaccountingpractice.com.
Both of us get so jacked, we kind of step on our words and stumble through. It's because we love this show.
We love doing this.
We get so pumped. Hey, one more thing that we love is we started a program. This is about 6-7 months ago, where we started offering our webinars that we've been doing on a fee basis before for free now, and you have access to it. You got to take one simple step on your phone. Send a text to 678-506-7543. I think that's Christina's personal cell phone, but 678-506-7543. Just put the text GMAP, G-M-A-P.
And do it now.
You got your phone with you, and you'll be able to sign up for our free access for our webinars. And it's good, educational, extreme content. Oh, and one more thing. If you don't have your phone on you because you're listening on the web somehow, maybe over your PC or something, you can also go to our bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/. Make sure you do this in all caps, GMAP 2017. That's GMAP 2017.
Wow.
Want to thank our corporate partners, make the show a reality.
Yep. Thank you, Funbox. Thank you, Nextiva.
Oh, my.
Thank you, Receipt
I got
Bank.
premature Chewbacca in there.
Yeah, I got a good Nextiva one for you today.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
cool.
Later on in the show.
Yeah, so we'll share them a little later on. Maybe we'll throw it in a different spot today just to shake things up or something. His name is Ed Kless. He joined Sage in July of 2003. I was going to say 2003. I think 2003 is better. And is currently the Senior Director of Partner Development and Strategy. He develops and delivers curriculum for Sage business partners on the art and practice of small business consulting. Ed is an author of The Soul of Enterprise. I know Ron's read it. I've
Love
read
that book.
It's powerful. Which is a compendium of a few of the episodes of his Soul with Enterprise, Business in the Knowledge Economy with Ron Baker podcast that he does. And he's also the founder of the VeraSage Institute. Before I introduce him, he's been rated one of the top 100 most influential people in accounting again and again. And you may not know this about Ed, 2 different colored eyes.
Really? Yeah. I did not know that.
I did not notice either. Ed, welcome.
And I swear I look him in the eye.
Welcome to our show.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's being called heterochromatic, right? Because you guys are homochromatic, Academy. I just want to let you know that if you didn't know that you were homochromatic. But I'm heterochromatic, and I can tell that there are 2 different types of people. There are people who either look you in the eye when they're talking or look at your mouth. And for the most part, people I have known people literally decades who then say to me suddenly, "You have 2 different color eyes."
Well, I'm certainly going to look closer now.
Yes.
I'm going to come up with a magnifying glass. What are you talking, a brown and a lighter shade of brown? I mean, what do you have going on?
No. It's a brown and a blue. I mean, it's not as stark as, say, David Bowie had. David Bowie's was really, but his was the result of an injury.
Oh.
The color drained out of his eye when he was hit in the head as a kid.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Which is kind of a weird
color
thing.
can drain out.
But no, mine is just, I was just born with it. It's a mutation. It's a gene mutation. I'm a mutant.
I knew it.
So I had a friend, his name's Larry O'Friel, who has 2 different colored eyes, and he says it was the best conversation starter when he was in high school and college to meet girls. Because it's like, oh my God, you have 2 different colors, and then they have to look you in the eyes, and then they fall dreamy in love with you. So that's what I heard. Or maybe he was making that up. I don't know.
Probably.
So
anyway.
Anywho. So today we're going to talk about project management. There's so many different definitions of what project management is. I want to know what your definition is, Ed.
Yeah, and you're right. There is, and I'm just going to try and keep it simple. And that it is basically this: is that the project management is making sure that the scope of the project, the resources of the project, and the time in which the project is done are kept in balance with one another. That's it.
Okay. And so project management for accountants, bookkeepers, it starts, I presume, even before the prospects, signed off on the dotted line.
For sure. And that's actually one of the things that a lot of people miss. There's an element of project management called project initiation. And it is, in my opinion, the most overlooked element of everything in project management, mostly because people jump immediately into planning, right? We hear a lot about project planning. If you talk about project management, the overwhelming majority of the conversation will be centered around planning, as well it should be, because it is a crucial element. But the thing that is often skipped is initiation, and one of the classes that I talk about is proper project initiation or engagement. If it's an accounting firm, this is sometimes done in the engagement letter at the accounting firm level, but oftentimes there's a couple things that are missed. The first thing is to define and make sure that you have not only the authority, but also the responsibility in equal proportion to each other. That's what project initiation is really about. I talk to lots and lots of consultants, whether they be lawyers or accountants or engineers or people who are in IT consulting. And one of the things that they don't get at the get-go is the full authority and responsibility. They get a lot of responsibility usually, but they don't get the necessary authority. And you want to make sure that those things are in equal balance up front in the engagement, because if they're not, you're going to be in trouble the rest of the way.
Right, you'll be stymied even before you get going.
Yeah, it's almost like setting the stage, right, on how they're going to hold up their end of the bargain to make the engagement that much more successful.
Yep, that's absolutely correct. And if you don't get that authority in equal proportion to your responsibility, I can tell you that the probability of you having a long-term successful project and even relationship has significantly decreased.
So I see this disclaimer on a lot of SOWs, statements of work, where it says you will be responsible for XYZ PDQ. Now, I haven't heard many people actually talking about that during the onboarding conversation. How do you go about introducing that? Because isn't it a little bit difficult to tell to somebody, listen, I'm going to be the authority on this one to make this happen. You need to do this.
Yeah, you need to. But one of the things that that's in part of the planning process. So we're talking about the authority is just to say, hey, listen, we have equal authority on certain aspects of it. And there's a document called the project charter that is involved in that. But once we're getting into the nitty gritty of it, now we've crossed into the planning stage, or the planning phase, I should say. And what I try to do there is yes, I want to define who's going to do what to a certain extent, but more importantly, what I want to do is I want to know how much access do I, as an external project manager, have to the internal people. And when I say access, I mean I might be working with a team of, say, 3 or 4 people at a particular customer situation. How much of their time do I have control over? In other words, can I give assignments internally inside your organization for up to, say, 25% of Steve's time? And that means that I can assign him work for up to 10 hours a week, right? and expect it to be done. I also want to make sure that I get some amount of commitment from whoever the executive sponsor of the project is to say, hey, listen, I want to have access to you for 30 minutes a week, or even 15 minutes a week, or an hour a week, whatever it is. And that is really one key that I see an awful lot of accountants, especially when they do projects, not get enough face time with the executive sponsor at the company of the project. They often say, well, this person's busy, I don't want to disturb them. Yes, I know, but oftentimes they're the only ones who can make certain decisions. So you have to define up front how much time on a weekly basis you're going to have access to them. So it's sometimes less about the particulars of what they're going to do, but just making sure that you have a proper amount of access to the right people.
We started off with this project initiation, and you said there was multiple points. So I do want to jump back to that. You said step one was to define authority and responsibility, make sure it's in proper proportions. Was there other parts of the project initiation that we need to address too?
Yes, and this is a really interesting one, and that is to make sure that you've addressed the fact that there is a certain vulnerability on the side of the customer. And what I mean by that is, whenever an outside expert is brought in, no matter what the circumstances are, so outside expert being a consultant, whenever a consultant is brought in, there's a certain amount of vulnerability inside the organization and anxiety. And that is because simply is this. Well, if we have to bring in an outside expert, why do I have you, whoever you is, right? Yeah. Why couldn't you do this? Right. What deficiency exists in you that we have to go to this outsider? Right now, and maybe it's something that it makes a lot of sense. For example, the work that I've done for years is mostly with people who are implementing a new accounting solution inside their firm. Well, that level of expertise, I would be afraid of a company that had expertise in implementing new systems. Right? In other words, they change their system every year just because they think it would be fun. Right?
It's kind of what you do over here, Mike. You're changing things on me every other year.
Oh, relax there. Get back in your hole. Get back in your cave.
But point being is that would just be a weird skill to have internally, right? So it may very well make sense that the skill doesn't exist inside the organization, but still, there's always this question of well, don't you have the expertise to do this? So the second step, and thanks for going back to that, is acknowledging that usually there is someone inside the customer's organization who has been put into a vulnerable position of some kind because we brought in an outside consultant, and we need to acknowledge that.
That's fascinating.
You know what? And it happens all the time when we're working with our members who are doing profit first consulting to an entity where they are working with the current bookkeeper and business owner. If they're not trying to minimize the defense mechanisms of the internal person, it's crazy. It's like they don't want to necessarily make the project a success. So absolutely addressing the vulnerability of the person that maybe should have the skills or thinks that they may be out on the job.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm thinking is, what about the threats people feel too, Ed?
Right.
Meaning not the person that is being questioned on their capabilities, but what about the other people that may have culpabilities, right? I mean, they may lose their job over this because there's outside consultant comes in unattached to the firm and says, you're gone, you're gone, you're gone.
Yeah. And that's part of this vulnerability. So it might not, and when I say it's at least one person, it could be more. But yes, oftentimes, especially with say ERP implementations or accounting implementations, there's a perception that, hey, my job is going to be taken away by this computer system, etc. And look, first things first, if that's really the case, then that has to be something that's acknowledged inside the organization. But however, I would say that the overwhelming majority, and by overwhelming, I'm talking 95+% of the implementations that I've ever been a part of, what they really wanted to do is they really wanted to free up their people to do other things, right? That were of higher value.
Right.
And that is usually the way that it is presented. In fact, because that's it's the truth, right? We want people to do. I want to take an accounts receivables clerk, let's say, who's busy entering cash receipts, and have them instead do the more valuable task, which is make collection calls, let's say.
Yeah.
Right. And because that's going to bring more cash into the system than them just entering checks. Now that might be an extreme example, but I just want that's the type of thing that we see over and over again. Is what can we do with our people to help them create higher value? Now, I will say this though, getting back to your question, that there are oftentimes people inside the organization who conduct missions of sabotage, right? To try to and I've been actively a part of that, where there are people who are saboteurs. By the way, you guys know the origin of the word sabotage?
I do not.
It's a fascinating story. All right, so it was in northern France. In the 1700s, there was a factory that was a weaving factory. They had all of these looms in there, and they were hand looms, and they brought in automated looming machines. And the workers in this factory went into the factory and they took off their shoes, which were made out of wood, and the shoes are called sabots. These are the same thing that we think of as Dutch shoes, right?
Clogs.
The Dutch wood shoes. Yep, clogs and stuff. Yep, exactly. But they were called sabots. And what they did is they went into the factory and they destroyed the equipment with their shoes, with their wood shoes, and they were then known as saboteurs after that.
That is fascinating.
That is great.
You never know where you're going to turn.
Ed knows all of this stuff, though. He knows where all the words.
He's a
are
historian.
derived from. Yeah,
He's a clog historian. Someone's got to be.
They still wear them out there too.
And I know in Holland, yeah. So,
yep.
All right. So, I understand the threat of saboteurs. Is there anything else we need to do in the project initiation phases? I'm trying to kind of bullet point out all these different.
Yeah. Those are the two major things.
Okay.
So first of all, authority and responsibility, and then acknowledge the vulnerability of one or more people.
Gotcha. Okay. Once that's in place, what should I do next to ensure project success?
Yeah, this is where we then move into what is classically thought of as the project management piece, and that is planning, right?
Yep.
And the great quote from General Eisenhower around this is that plans are worthless, planning is essential, right?
Yeah.
And he uttered that famous quote about D-Day. I often joke that Eisenhower was the project manager of the 20th century. He managed this little project called D-Day, right?
Right. Right, where everything went wrong, right? I remember the story of the plane, the bombing raid that was off by, I think, 2 miles. They bombed empty fields and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So continue on.
Well, let's not forget about one of the greatest philosophers who said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the nose.
That sounds like Tyson, right?
Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mike Tyson. Yes, that's absolutely
a spokesperson before Mike Tyson said that, but okay. Yeah. All right. So go through project planning.
Yeah, but those are both equally true quotes, by the way, and I agree wholeheartedly with both of them. But this notion that we now move into planning, and here's the interesting part of planning is that oftentimes the customer will say things to the consultant like, "Well, why do we have to go through this whole planning process? Haven't you done this before?"
That's
right?
Interesting.
And here's the scary part is that far too often the professional goes, they kind of walk away with their tail between the legs going, "Yeah, you're right, I've done this before." Right? Instead, what they should say is this: "Yes, I've done this before. I am the expert, and the expert is telling you that we need to plan."
Yes.
There you go. Boom.
But they may need some more details. Is it because everything's not cookie cutter, that there's going to be variables and dynamics that appear as we go through the planning process?
That's absolutely correct. And a project by definition is a unique, right? The definition of a project, according to the Project Management Institute, is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. That's the Project Management Institute's definition of a project. And so therefore, by definition, every project is, number one, temporary. So keep that in mind. I hear these projects that go on for decades. I think they're only in government, though.
And psychologists, supposedly.
Yeah, exactly. But then the second important word is unique. By definition, every single project is unique. Right, so even if I've done this before, if I've done a tax return before, even if I've done this person's tax return before last year, this year is different. There's a unique element to that, and I have really quick story that demonstrate this. I was once doing a project at this really interesting organization, and it was two sister companies. One was called TransPerfect Translations. They still exist, by the way. TransPerfect Translations, you may have seen their ads in airline magazines, and what they do is they translate legal documents from one language to another. That's their main focus. And the other company, the sister company, was called translations.com. Right, mm-hmm. And they have since been taken over by Google Translate.
Right.
Their vision 15 years ago was to translate websites on the fly. Well, that's done. Check. We got it. We already do that.
Right. Sorry.
But anyway, what was interesting about these guys is that it was owned by an ex-husband and wife. Right. And like I'm sketchy on the details in this, but it was something like they each own 51% of one entity and 49% of the other. But what was weird is that, so I'm doing these, and it was the same hardware, it was the same server that we were doing this implementation on. This was long before cloud. It was even the same people because the people were shared, right? And what was so funny about this is that one implementation went extraordinarily smoothly, and the other one was as bumpy as all get out.
Interesting.
The only difference was the ownership, right? So the people were the same, the hardware was the same. It was the industry was the same, but one was a challenge and one was easy, and it was simply because of the management style of one person versus the other.
I have a saying above my desk at my home office, not here at this office, but my home office, from George Washington, and he said, effectively, a task assigned to two people that can be adequately addressed by one is bound to fail. And that's what we have in this office here. Many times there's projects come through and it gets thrown to Ron and me. And those are the projects that get stymied. Like, who's handling
Stop
what?
with the insider look. We're not there yet.
So what we're trying to do is consistently say who's the one person that's responsible and the authority on this thing, and let them be the sole decision maker. And it sounds very akin to what you're teaching us right now.
That's absolutely correct. Is that ultimately you need one throat to choke, right? That's kind of the joke.
Well, that's a way to put it.
I never heard of that way like that.
Yeah. But it was put this way to me: a dragon should only have one head, right?
Yeah.
The two-headed dragons always end up getting killed because they fight against one another in the end. So.
Yeah,
but yeah, and that's important to acknowledge that there is that one person who's authority. But we're moving into this whole planning thing. Planning is incredibly important because you spend so much time doing it. In fact, I would usually tell my customers, listen, we're going to spend twice as long on planning as you think is necessary.
And what's the response to that?
Yeah, well, then they usually would joke, well, I don't think we should only plan for an hour then.
Ah, cute.
But what I would say and what I mean by that is we're going to start going through this planning process, and when you say, all right, enough with the planning, let's start executing, then we're halfway done. Right? And this is the reason to loop back in the whole D-Day story, and you're right, the reason why Eisenhower is the project manager of the 20th century is because 90% of D-Day did not go according to plan. Including the day, by the way. It was supposed to be the 5th that ended up being the 6th, and it was canceled because of weather.
Yep.
Right? Now, one day late for an accounting-related project is not a big deal. One day late when you got 1.25 million Germans wanting you dead, that's a pretty big deal. Right? And so 90% did not go according to plan, yet 90% of the objectives were achieved.
Wow. And you attribute that, he attributes that, we all attribute that to planning.
Correct. And that's why I say he's the project manager of the 20th century. I teach project management. I was pretty good at it when I practiced it, but I can tell you that if I did not go 90% according to plan, I was not achieving 90% of the objectives. That was beyond my capability.
Does planning mean that I consider the variables if things go wrong, with the what if then statements?
Certainly, and that's one element. And one of the things that I think is most often missed about about planning is that there are elements of a plan, right? And it's not just one. Here's the worst thing that's happened to project management in the last couple of decades: the release of a product called Microsoft Project. Okay, and the reason why this is an awful, terrible thing is that many people have begun to think of a project as a pretty but fairly useless diagram, Gantt chart.
That's true,
right? I'm not a big, and that's actually part of what's called the activity plan, right? So that's one of the 6 elements, and the activity is one of, and it's a minor element in my view. Right, by far the most important element is what's called the scope plan. Right, that's so let's see if I can kind of quickly go through them, and I don't think we have time to deal with all of them today. But it's scope, communications, resource, activity, risk, and quality.
Okay, lay them on me as best you can.
Those are the 6 elements. But we're not going to have time to go through all of them. But activity is one of them, and that's what Microsoft Project is. I wouldn't even say good at. It makes it pretty.
Right.
But you can do a nice, really Gantt chart in Excel too. If you just do in the help system, just do Gantt chart in Excel, and you can do one that's
get those
that's
pretty
happy
bars going across the
people.
screen.
Yeah, exactly. Get those bars going for people. But in all seriousness, I mean, Microsoft Project is a big problem because people think that is a project plan. It's not. It's a minor element in it. And there's nothing about scope. There's nothing about communications. There's nothing about risk. And what you're asking about here is the risk piece. So let's talk a little bit about that. One of the things that we want to identify in where we can is the risk. Now, risk is a very weird thing in project management because when you and I use the word risk, it has a relatively negative connotation, right? We say risk, that's risky behavior, right? It's got a slight negative connotation. In project management, risk has both a negative element, but there's also what are called the positive risks of the project, right?
Well, I can't say right because that's new to me. What is that?
Okay, so normal people, non-project managers, would refer to them as the benefits, right?
Okay.
Or the goals, right? Yep. This is the upside potential. So this is putting in a new accounting system is going to save us $70,000 in shipping costs, right?
Gotcha. Yep.
Now notice that the language here: positive risk, goal, benefit. What's important to note on these things is, number one, is that as a goal, it means it's something that we aspire to but might not happen. And this is where we get into another confusing element of project management, and that is the intersection of the use of the term goal and objective. When I was first practicing this stuff and I didn't fully understand it, I would say things like, so what are your goals and objectives of this project? And I would use the terms interchangeably, but they're not interchangeable at all, not in the slightest, right? Because a goal, as I said, is something to which we aspire but might not occur, at least in full. And what's even more important is that a goal of a project outlives the project itself, meaning we sometimes don't achieve the goal of the project until the project has actually been completed for 3, 6, 10 months or a year or more. So take back the example that I just gave. If we implement this system, we're going to save $70,000 in shipping costs. Are we going to save $70,000 in shipping costs the day that we go live on the new system?
Of course not.
No, right? Yet that is usually tracked at right around there, maybe 2 weeks after. That's considered the end of the project, right? Yet the savings isn't going to happen for perhaps a year or more. So a goal is something that oftentimes outlives the project, but it also is something that we aspire to. Now, an objective, that's a different animal. An objective of a project is something that we are going to do. We're going to check them off the list. In fact, one of the definitions of end of project is all of the objectives have been achieved. We're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. The idea is that if we do all of the, say, 5 objectives of a project, that at some point in the future, that will allow us to achieve the goal.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Here's a question for you. I'm going to try to do my own little historical reference. I'm far from a historian, so you probably already know this story, but I want to share with you because I think this is classic. It's a classic representation of what can go wrong with a project when you have a project plan in place. So this was back in World War II. The RAF, the Royal Air Force, is sending bombing squads over the Nazis and are dropping these bombs on the Nazis in 1935. This is before the U.S. enters the war. The problem was the Nazis were sending up anti-aircraft gunfire and shrapnel and so forth, and the loss rate of the British planes was extraordinary. I think out of every 10 that went out, 2 returned.
Yep.
So have you heard the story? The project plan was put in place where they said, okay, let's analyze where the holes are in these planes, and we're going to put the armor there. Well, this points to the obvious. The obvious was, for our listeners that may not know the story, the holes were all over the wings, and so the obvious answer is armor the wings. And one guy stood up, his name was Abraham Wald, and he said, no, those are the planes that are making it back. The obvious thing is to armor where the holes are, but you got to realize the planes we're analyzing have returned, so therefore you can fly with holes in your wings. It's actually where they're not being hit, the planes that return, is what is taking them down because they're not making it back.
Right.
So, and by the way, Ron, I included that in my new book, Clockwork, that story, just to put it out there. That's where I know the story.
They just flew higher, right?
Yeah. So I see this, I think, in other projects that go on, Ed, in that we look for the obvious cause of a problem and actually start repairing something that doesn't have any impact. Where does I'm sure, are you familiar with that story? What's your assessment of it, and how does that translate into how we can better run projects?
Yeah, no, I am familiar with that story, and yes, but that's even just beyond projects, and perhaps it gets to the subject of maybe a future appearance. But it is there is a huge problem in business today in misanalyzing cause and effect, and there's far too many people who interpret correlation as causation. And
yes,
yeah,
can you repeat that again?
There are
correlation and causation.
Yes, far too many people in business who equate correlation and causation. Wet streets do not cause rain. Right?
But wait, hold on. So correlation and causation does happen when it comes to sporting events. I swear to God, when I wear my lucky socks, we win, and I forgot one game, right? And they lost.
Yeah, I know. That's for sure. That's not important here. You're right.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. It happens.
There it works. It works.
We're not going to talk about it.
There are socks that work. I've had them.
Yeah, and they can't be washed to the chagrin.
You haven't had them since 1986, have you, though?
But that's a huge problem in business. So you're asking a very interesting question. Yeah. And by the way, there's a second one, and I'm curious as to what you guys think of this, is the misapplication of the use of averages where you should use median instead. But that's all.
Oh, yes.
What does our average customer look like? Forgetting that your median customer is really the middle point and looks nothing like the average customer.
Right, and I fall victim to my own idiocy of doing that. We looked at our average customer, and we were skewed by these 3 major customers, and it brought the average up way outside the median. Yeah. So anyway, carry on.
So sorry, I tend to talk in tangents, and I apologize to your listeners who are now like, "What the hell? I thought this was about project management."
I heard dirty socks for sporting events. What's going on? Yeah.
But I can recover from tangents well. So we were back at. I remember where we were. We were talking about risk, and project risk. And yes, you should look at these project risks. But remember, you have to look at the upside potential. Those are the positive risks of the project, as well as the negative risks. And for certain negative risks, for certain of the hey, this could happen, this could go wrong. You need to develop ahead of time what's called a contingency plan. We hear that term all the time, too. That's another project management term that is often thrown out there that people just don't really understand what it means. A contingency plan is when you have already thought about something happening, and when it does, you make an adjustment that you've already planned ahead of time. That's a contingency plan. What most people think of a contingency plan is, oh, well, crap, it's not working. Now what do? We need a contingency plan. No. That's not a contingency plan. That's plan B, right? That's a whole new plan, right? But a contingency plan must have been thought out ahead of time. That it's an if-then statement. If this happens, then we're going to do that.
But can we kind of peel back the onion so far that we lose the onion? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is always a danger, and I would say that the answer is yes, but, and here's why. Most of the errors in project management that I see professionals make are in way out of proportion, are due more to lack of planning than over planning. And again, that is mostly because customers are more interested in getting us to an execution standpoint. They want the checklist. They want all right, what do we got to do? Let's get this done. They're anxious because in many cases they've got a significant problem. Otherwise you wouldn't be there. Right. So they want to get this solved, and they think that the fastest way to do this is to start executing. And I think what we make the mistake of letting them force our hand on execution far too early. There's a great diagram that I think the Japanese developed. That it's a just a timeline.
It's a Gantt chart.
Yeah, no, it's not a Gantt chart. It's a timeline. And it's broken into three big steps. There's the planning one that's really long, and then the execute, which is shorter, and then there's the really short one, which is follow up, and then there's the one where the planning is cut in half, the execution takes twice as long, and then the follow up is twice as long as that.
Yeah, there you go. And that typifies traditional project execution, I think. What can our listeners do? I think they are more skewed toward the side of under project management, and I say that because, embarrassingly, that's the category I fall in. I'm in the median there. What can people listening to the show do to get started on project management? This is a lot to digest. Is there a way to get started in improving our process here?
Yeah, gosh, and the subject is huge, and I'll do some extremes. For those of you who are really into this, I strongly recommend that you go to the Project Management Institute, PMI.org, and look at taking some classes. They've got some terrific material on it. Not all of it necessarily relevant to knowledge work, but they really have thought about this long and hard and do some really good work there. But that is on the extreme. For those who are just want to maybe begin to dabble in this, I think the first piece of advice that I have is become confident in your or become convicted about it. As I said, the big challenge that I see is far too many experts moving away with their tail between their legs as soon as the customer puts up any form of resistance to planning. Right? Yeah. So you've got to have a conviction about this. You've got to have confidence in yourself that no, we're doing this right. I am the expert. That's why you hired me. Right? So the first place is some self-confidence. But then second, do some investigation. There are some things, there are some resources out there that cut some of this stuff back. It's okay to go pick up a Project Management for Dummies book. Right, and just get exposed to some of the basic concepts without going to a 5-day PMI class. That's perfectly acceptable. But I do think it's important to educate yourself on some of the basics. I'd be happy to share a resource with you, especially for accountants. I wrote an article for the Journal of Accountancy, and I think it appeared in 2008, called Project Management for Accountants. It's out on the web and available for people. So if you want to go out and get that, you can. It's a really a good place to start.
That's perfect. Actually, awesome. If you could give us the link, we'll put that in our show notes. And Ed, where can our listeners find out more about you, Ron, your buddy Ron Baker, VeraSage, all that stuff?
Yep. Thanks for asking about that. The Soul of Enterprise, which you mentioned earlier, is our radio show and podcast. So that's thesoulofenterprise.com. I'm very easily findable on all things social media. I am the only Ed Kless in the world that I can track down. So just if you Google Ed Kless, you will find me.
Wonderful. And if you can't distinguish it at Kless, just look at his eyes, and we've learned that.
That's right.
if you do run across two.
Right. And as always, it's such a joy having you on the show. Thanks for all this
Thank you,
information.
Ed.
My pleasure.
All right, Ron, here's what we're going to do. After we have kind of a decompression from that cerebralness, right. I mean, gosh, he's so intelligent. It's hard to keep pace. We're going to then summarize what we learned. We're going to do a little insider access, and I got a GMAP Now task for us. But first, I want to thank our corporate partners to make this show a reality. Now, I'm just going to share one, and then we'll do another one a little later on. I told you I want to shake it up a little bit today.
Shake it up.
You had something exciting to say about Nextiva?
I did.
What was that?
Well, so Nextiva, it was funny. I got that noise canceling phone that they had, and then I was on another phone system. Like, we're out in a pit, and then I was at somebody else's office, and I was listening to their phone, and it was awful. I'm like, holy cow, this noise canceling technology that Nextiva has in their phones really works.
So I don't understand the noise canceling. Is it that?
I don't know how it works.
No, but how's it
the
play
listener
out? So the
can't
listener
hear all, because we're in that pit, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's talking, everybody's going out. You ever call those call centers and you hear all
feel
the
the
commotion in the background?
They don't hear that. They just hear just you.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
All right, Nextiva, check them out. It's nextiva.com. Extraordinary phone system, extraordinary company, extraordinary CRM. All right, why don't we talk about what we learned, Ron? What did you learn today?
Well, the first thing, I learned two very important things. One, the project initiation. How much access you're going to have to the internal people, how much access you're going to have to the executive sponsor, and making sure that you have this access to all of these other people that you're going to probably need. I found that very fascinating to lay that groundwork. But also the vulnerability. Address the vulnerability on the side of the customer. It's so important. I see it every single day, yet we don't get ahead of it. So getting ahead of the vulnerability of the customer, it's going to make the project and the initiative that much more successful.
Yeah, I think just being aware that there's that emotion going on with the customer, the person that brings you in is also at risk, and the other people are territorial. That's right. My big takeaways: Microsoft Project, the dirty deed it's done. Because it's funny, when I thought of projects, I think of Microsoft right away.
All the time. Me too.
Right away. And it is that Gantt chart, those freaking silly bars, those horizontal bars with those different colors. Like, oh, how many days are you into this? And this is contingent upon that. And that's not what true project management is. So that was a big awareness factor for me. I like Ed's starting point. Like, just believe in yourself. I think the biggest thing that prevents successful organizations inevitably is that the leadership team, the small business owner, doesn't believe in themselves. And it's easy to say, just believe in yourself. I think you need to go another step and have an awakening of what you do know and what your clients don't know. I think a lot of people go into a project and say, well, they know this stuff too. I'm not introducing anything new. Realize it may be routinized in your own head and you understand it emphatically as a result. They don't. It's new to them. Right. And I think that's where confidence comes from.
Yeah, and the whole planning thing. I mean, when I'm on the buying end and when I'm the customer that is, wanting to get things done, I'm like, screw the planning. Just get it done. Get it done. Get it done. Let's see. What do I have to do? And, being able to push back on guys like you and I and say, listen, I am the expert.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
That is good.
Yeah.
All right, that set me up for one more. Pop. I want to thank another corporate partner. Boom. Let's talk about Fundbox real quick.
Yeah, sure. The ultimate cash flow accelerating company.
Yep. Can you tell me a little more about what they do?
Yeah, so if you have deliverables out and you're needed that money to come on in, you reach out to Fundbox. They'll front you the money, but you'll still be responsible for contacting those customers directly yourself.
Yeah, so it's for invoice work.
Yeah.
Invoice work. So if your clients, because I know, listen, you're in accounting or bookkeeping practice, maybe this applies to your clients, but if they have invoices out for work that they've delivered, Fundbox will release the funds in its entirety to them. It's a great way to manage short-term cash flow needs. All right. It's like the insider access. Yeah.
Insider access.
What do you got for me? Let me pull out the lightsaber here.
The transition saber.
Yeah. So, but just because this is kind of a new segment, I just want to share what this is. This is stuff that we're doing in house. So many people are asking us how Profit First Professionals has grown so quickly and healthily, and so we said, let's give some insider access. So, What do you got?
So one of the things that we do during our interview process is we really stress and want to identify to make sure that the person that we're bringing aboard owns responsibility. owns the success of a project or initiative, owns the responsibility if it should go wrong. By individuals owning the responsibility for their actions, for the success of the project, and also when things go wrong, it eliminates all the bullshit.
Yeah, it's the classic, have that single point of contact. The confusion that happens here at our office, as we were sharing with Ed, is when you and I are both assigned to a project, and then Christina will come and say, hey, Mike, what should I do? Hey, Ron, what should I do? And now we're giving her conflicting answers.
Right.
So she, as the employee, can do no wrong, but we look like idiots, and then we're like, well, what the hell's going on?
And the funny thing is we'll both respond. Both answers are right, but they're not exactly the same answers, and and Christina is still confused.
Yeah, exactly. So singular point of contact. And then the other thing we do is when it still comes up when an employee goes to both of us, we say, actually, that's Ron's category, so I have no response. Go to Ron.
Yep.
Also,
well, yeah, the flip side of it is that if I don't have the answer, and say maybe Christina thinks I'm responsible for it, there's always going to be a situation where, you know what, thank you for deferring to me, but I'm going to kick it back to Mike. He's actually the subject matter expert on this particular part of what you're looking for.
That part, but if you're the lead, it's my responsibility to go back to you and make sure you know what's going on. So it's just having a clear, singular contact to manage everything, and that person can deflect questions around, but that person has to be in the know for everything. And that's been a game changer for us. One more thing that's a game changer is this song.
Getting jacked in the middle of the day.
I know.
Game changer.
It's 11 in the morning right now.
Why didn't we crank this when we were working out?
Oh, yeah, we had that crazy workout here at the office. Yeah.
Give it to us, Mike. Give it to us.
Yeah. All right. This is the GMAP Now task. The one task that if you do it, it'll have an immediate impact on your business. You know, project management, Ed taught you a lot of stuff today. I think there's 2 steps you can do immediately that will be the game changer. And he outlined it right in the beginning. When you have a project of any magnitude with a client of yours, ask them these 2 questions. What am I responsible for? Right? And outline that. And then what do I have authorization to make decisions on in those responsibilities? And it's that second question that no one asks.
Right. Oh,
you're responsible to make sure that the numbers are correct and you do this and that. And then you don't have access to the tools to make it happen. And now you're the one who gets choked, as Ed said. You're the one who gets choked, but you have no ability because you don't have the authorization or control over it. Ask those 2 questions and projects will go a million times smoother. Oh, mind blown.
Wow, awesome. I have a feeling that this is probably going to be one of our top 10 episodes.
Could be.
So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you guys joining us for today's episode. And as always, you can review us on Stitcher, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn Radio. Of course, we would love your 5-star ratings, but your feedback is what's most important.
Rock and roll, my friends. And one more thing. Why don't you swing on by Profit First Professionals?
Yeah, check out our new website.
.com. Yeah, by the time this goes live, the new website should better be up.
Yep.
Talking about project management. Brand new website. It's at profitfirstprofessionals.com. And here's what we are. We are an organization of accountants, bookkeepers, and consultants, all driving profitability in their clients. We have 225. We have an international presence. We have another headquarters in Europe now with 25 members there, 190 plus folks in the U.S. Listen, the organization is growing, but ironically, it's not growing nearly fast enough. The demand is outstripping the supply in a huge way. We get so many inquiries from entrepreneurs saying, I need someone who can guide me to profit using the Profit First method. Why not that be you? Traditional accounting and bookkeeping and coaching is going away. But what's coming is the consultative model, bigger and better than ever before. Of course, the challenge is how do you do it? Well, we have the answer by being a profit consultant. We'll show you how to do it. I think you need us just as much as we need you. So go to profitfirstprofessionals.com, click on the Become button, fill out the form, and we'll get the conversation going. And maybe you're just a few weeks away from being a Profit First consultant yourself and entering the new field of profit consulting.
Do it now.
Do it now. All right, let's get out of here.